The morning sun cast long shadows across the desert as Tom, Mitchell rode his horse along the dusty trail that led toward Apache territory. He was a man of 32 years, weathered by countless days under the harsh sun, his face marked by lines that spoke of hard living and harder decisions. His brown hair had grown longer than he preferred, touching his collar, and his blue eyes carried a wariness that came from years of frontier life. Tom wasn't like most cowboys who avoided Apache lands at all costs. He had a different reason for being here, one that made his heart heavy with each step his horse took deeper into dangerous territory. Strapped to his saddle were supplies he'd carefully gathered over months: medicine, blankets, food, and small toys that any child might treasure. These weren't trade goods or peace offerings. They were gifts for his daughters. 2 years ago, during a brutal Apache raid on a settlement near the Mexican border, Tom's wife Sarah and their twin daughters, Maria, had been taken captive. Sarah had been killed during the capture, but the girls, only 6 years old at the time, had been spared and adopted into the tribe according to Apache custom. Tom had searched for them ever since, following every lead, paying every tracker, and questioning anyone who might have information. Most people told him to give up. "Those girls are Apache now," they would say. "Even if you found them, they wouldn't remember you." But Tom couldn't accept that. Every night he dreamed of their small faces, their laughter, the way Maria would climb onto his shoulders while would braid flowers into his horse's mane. They were his blood, his heart, and no amount of time or distance could change that. The terrain grew rougher as he traveled deeper into the wilderness. Red rocks jutted up from the earth like ancient monuments, and the sparse vegetation offered little shade from the blazing sun. Tom knew he was being watched. He could feel eyes upon him from the moment he'd entered Apache territory, but he pressed on. He carried his rifle, but it remained untouched across his saddle. This wasn't a mission of war. As the day wore on, Tom reached a familiar landmark, a distinctive rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant. He'd been here before 3 months ago when he got close enough to see an Apache camp in the distance. That day, he'd spotted 2 young girls playing near the creek, and his heart had nearly stopped. Even from far away, something about their movements, their size, had convinced him they were Maria and... He tried to approach that day, but Apache warriors had surrounded him before he could get close. Only quick thinking and faster talking had saved his life. He'd claimed to be a trader, showed them some goods, and they'd escorted him away with stern warnings never to return. But he had returned again and again, always searching, always hopping. Now, as Tom made camp near the sleeping giant rock, he wondered if this time would be different. He'd learned some Apache words, had practiced the right gestures of respect, and had brought better gifts. More importantly, he'd learned patience. The Apache were not his enemies, they were his daughter's family now. If he wanted to see Maria, and he needed to approach this like a father seeking his children, not like a cowboy trying to steal them back. The night was cold in the desert, and Tom built a small fire to warm himself. As he sat staring into the flames, he pulled out a small wooden horse he'd carved during the long winter months. It was painted bright blue, his favorite color, with a tiny saddle that actually moved up and down. In his other pocket was a small doll for Maria, made by a Mexican woman in town who'd taken pity on his story. The doll had black braided hair and wore a traditional dress that would appeal to either Apache or Mexican sensibilities. As Tom prepared for sleep, wrapping himself in his bedroll, he whispered a prayer to the stars above. "Let me see them tomorrow," he said quietly. "Let them know their father never stopped looking for them." The desert wind carried his words away, but in his heart he felt that somehow, somewhere, his daughters might hear them. The next morning would bring him closer to answers than he'd ever been, but also closer to the most dangerous situation of his life. For now, though, Tom slept the sleep of a man who had never given up hope, no matter how impossible that hope seemed to everyone else around him. Dawn broke with the sound of horses approaching, their hooves creating small clouds of dust as they moved across the hard-packed earth. Tom woke instantly, his years on the frontier having taught him to sleep with one ear always listening. Through the gray morning light, he could see 4 Apache warriors on horseback, moving toward his small camp with the fluid grace of men who had been born to ride. Tom remained calm, though his heart raced. He slowly stood, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. The lead warrior was a man Tom recognized from his previous encounters, a stern-faced Apache with silver streaking his black hair and scars that told stories of many battles. This was a war chief who commanded respect throughout the territory. "You return again, white man," spoke in heavily accented English, his dark eyes never leaving Tom's face. "We told you not to come back to our lands." Tom nodded respectfully. "I come seeking my daughters," he said, his voice steady despite the danger he felt surrounding him. "I mean no harm to your people. I only want to see my children." One of the younger warriors, his face painted with red and black stripes, spoke rapidly in Apache too. Tom couldn't understand all the words, but he caught enough to know they were discussing what to do with him. Some wanted to drive him away immediately. Others suggested worse solutions. Held up his hand for silence. "You speak of children, but Apache children belong to Apache people. If white man's children live among us, they are no longer white man's children." "I understand your ways," Tom replied carefully. "But a father's love doesn't die just because his children live in a different place. I've brought gifts not to buy them back, but to show my respect for those who have cared for them." The war chief's expression didn't change, but Tom noticed a slight shift in his posture. "Show these gifts." Tom moved slowly to his saddlebags, aware that 4 rifles were pointed in his direction. He pulled out blankets woven in bright patterns, bags of coffee beans, sugar wrapped in cloth, and small mirrors that caught the morning light. But most importantly, he brought out the wooden horse and the doll he'd made. "These are for Maria and," he said, holding the toys carefully. "If they are here, if they are safe, I would like them to know their father remembers them." Studied the toys for a long moment. Tom held his breath, waiting. Finally, the war chief spoke to his men in rapid Apache, then turned back to Tom. "You will come with us," decided. "But if you try any tricks, if you bring danger to our people, you will not leave our territory alive." Tom nodded solemnly. "I give you my word, I only want to see them." The ride to the Apache camp took most of the morning, winding through narrow canyons and across rocky terrain that would have been impossible to navigate without a guide. Tom marveled at how well hidden their settlement was. No wonder the army had such difficulty finding Apache villages. They seemed to melt into the landscape itself. As they approached the camp, Tom's pulse quickened. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and he could hear voices speaking in the musical tones of the Apache language. Children played among the wickiups, temporary shelters made from poles and brush that could be quickly dismantled and moved. And then he saw them. 2 girls, now 8 years old, were helping an Apache woman grind corn near one of the shelters. They had grown taller, their skin darkened by the desert sun, and they wore traditional Apache clothing, deerskin dresses decorated with beads and small pieces of metal that caught the light. Their hair was longer than he remembered, braided in the Apache style. But Tom knew them instantly. The way Maria tilted her head when she concentrated on her work was exactly like her mother. Quick, bright movements as she darted around the grinding stone were unchanged from the little girl who used to chase butterflies in their garden back home. "Papa," the word was barely a whisper, but Tom heard it clearly. Had looked up and seen him. For a moment, she stood frozen, as if trying to decide whether he was real or just a dream. Then she dropped the small bowl she'd been holding and ran toward him. Tom dismounted quickly and caught his daughter in his arms, tears streaming down his weathered face. She felt so small, so real, so alive. "My little sunshine, I've been looking for you everywhere." Maria approached more cautiously, but Tom could see the recognition in her eyes. "Papa, we thought you were dead," she said in English that carried a slight Apache accent. "Grandmother White Dove told us you might have been killed by the bad men who took Mama away." Tom knelt down to embrace both his daughters, not caring that the entire Apache camp was now watching this reunion. "I've been searching for you since that terrible day," he told them. "Every day, every night, I've been trying to find you." The girls chattered excitedly in a mixture of English and Apache, telling him about their life in the tribe, about how Grandmother White Dove had taken care of them, about the skills they'd learned and the friends they'd made. Tom listened with wonder and heartbreak, realizing how much of their lives he'd missed. But even in this moment of joy, he was aware of the tension around them. Not everyone in the camp was pleased to see this reunion. Some of the warriors looked angry, while others appeared confused. The Apache woman who had been teaching the girls to grind corn, presumably Grandmother White Dove, watched with sad, knowing eyes. Stepped forward. "The children know you," he acknowledged. "But they have been Apache for 2 winters now. They have learned our ways, our language, our customs. They are part of our family." Tom looked at his daughters, then at the Apache chief. He could see the dilemma clearly now. These people had saved his children's lives, had raised them as their own, had given them a home and a family when they had nothing. How could he ask them to give that up? I understand, Tom said slowly, and I'm grateful to you for caring for them, but they are still my daughters and I am still their father. The tension in the camp was growing. Some of the Apache people were speaking in angry voices, and Tom realized that his presence here might have created a bigger problem than he'd anticipated. The question now was not just about his daughters, but about honor, tradition, and the complex relationships between two very different worlds. The argument that erupted in the Apache camp was unlike anything Tom had ever witnessed. Voices rose in passionate debate as the entire community seemed to divide into different groups. Some warriors wanted Tom removed immediately, claiming his presence threatened the harmony of their village. Others argued that the children's obvious joy at seeing their father meant something important that couldn't be ignored. Grandmother White Dove, the elderly Apache woman who had become Maria's adoptive mother, stepped forward to speak. Her voice carried the weight of age and wisdom, and gradually the arguing voices grew quiet to listen. When these children came to us, she said in careful English, speaking slowly so Tom could understand, they were broken birds with wounded wings. They cried for their mother every night. They cried for their father every day. We healed their wings, we taught them to fly again in our way, but a bird's first nest is never forgotten. A younger warrior named interrupted angrily. They are Apache now. They speak our language, they know our customs, they are our children. This white man cannot come here and take back what belongs to us. Tugged on Tom's shirt. Papa, what are they saying? She whispered. Are you going to take us away? Tom looked down at his daughter's worried face. The question cut through his heart like a knife. He had dreamed for 2 years of this moment, of finding his girls and bringing them home. But now, seeing how they had grown, how they had adapted, how they belonged here, he wasn't sure what home even meant anymore. I don't know, sweetheart, he answered honestly. I came here to find you, but I can see that these people love you very much. Maria spoke up, her 8-year-old voice carrying surprising wisdom. Papa, we remember you and Mama. We remember our house with the blue shutters and the garden where Mama grew roses, but this is our home now too. Grandmother White Dove tells us stories every night, taught me to ride horses, knows how to make pottery that won't break when you drop it. Raised his hand for silence again. There is an old way to settle disputes like this, he announced, but it requires courage from the white man. I'll do whatever is necessary, Tom replied without hesitation. You must prove your respect for our ways and your love for these children by undergoing the test of the burning circle, explained. You will sit in the center of our ceremonial fire circle while our medicine man calls on the spirits to judge your heart. If you are found worthy, if you survive the test without crying out or trying to escape, then we will discuss what should happen with the children. Tom's blood ran cold. He'd heard stories about Apache trials by fire, though he'd never seen one. Men had died in those circles, burned alive while the tribe watched. But as he looked at Maria's faces, he knew he would face any danger for them. And if I don't survive, he asked. Then the spirits will have decided that the children belong only with us, replied simply. Grandmother White Dove stepped forward again, her weathered hand touching Tom's arm. White Father, she said gently, you do not understand what you agree to do. The burning circle is not just about fire. It is about facing the truth in your heart. Some men die not from burns, but from seeing things they cannot bear to see. Tom nodded grimly. When do we do this? Tonight when the moon is high, decided. But first you will spend the day with your daughters. If these are to be your last hours, they should be shared with the children you have traveled so far to find. The rest of the day passed like a dream. Tom sat with Maria and by the creek that ran near the camp, listening to their stories and sharing memories of their life before the raid. He was amazed by how much Apache language they had learned, how comfortable they seemed with customs that were completely foreign to him. Showed him the pottery she'd learned to make, small bowls and cups decorated with geometric patterns that had meaning in Apache culture. This pattern means family, she explained, pointing to interlocking circles. Grandmother White Dove says family isn't just people who look like you, but people who take care of your heart. Maria demonstrated her horseback riding skills, racing around the camp on a painted pony that responded to her commands as if they were one creature. Says I have the hands of a true Apache rider, she said proudly. He says the horses trust me because I understand their spirits. As the day went on, Tom began to understand the impossible situation he'd created. These weren't just his daughters anymore. They were Apache daughters too. They had two families, two cultures, two homes. Taking them away would tear them in half just as surely as leaving them here would tear his heart in half. When evening came, the Apache people began gathering wood for the ceremonial fire. Tom watched them work, knowing that in a few hours he would either prove himself worthy of his daughter's love or die trying. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 2 years trying to get his children back, and now he might lose his life in the attempt. As the sun set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and red, Tom gave his daughters the toys he'd brought. Clutched the blue wooden horse to her chest, while Maria carefully examined every detail of her new doll. "Papa," Maria said quietly, "do you have to do the burning circle thing?" "It's the only way," Tom replied, smoothing her long black hair. "The Apache people need to know that I respect their ways and that my love for you is real." Looked up at him with worried eyes. "What if you get hurt?" Tom hugged both his daughters close. "Then you'll know that your father loved you enough to risk everything to find you," he told them. "And you'll know that whatever happens, you have two families who love you more than anything in the world." As the moon rose over the desert, the Apache drums began to beat, calling the community to witness the test that would determine the fate of a father and his daughters. Tom knew that before the night was over, everything would change, one way or another. The ceremonial fire blazed in the center of the Apache camp as the entire community gathered in a wide circle around it. The flames reached higher than Tom's head, crackling and spitting sparks into the star-filled night sky. The heat was so intense that people had to stand 20 feet back to avoid being burned. Tom stood at the edge of the circle, stripped to the waist as tradition demanded, his chest and arms already glistening with sweat from the fire's heat. The Apache medicine man, an ancient figure whose face was painted with sacred symbols, approached carrying a bundle of burning sage that filled the air with sweet, pungent smoke. "White Father," the medicine man spoke in Apache, his words translated by, "you will sit in the sacred circle for the time it takes the moon to move one hand's width across the sky. If you cry out, if you try to leave, if your courage fails, the test ends and your spirit is judged weak. Do you understand?" Tom nodded, his throat too dry to speak. He could see Maria and standing with grandmother White Dove, their young faces tight with worry, was clutching her wooden horse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The medicine man began to chant in the ancient Apache language, calling on spirits to witness what was about to happen. Other members of the tribe joined in, their voices rising and falling in harmony with the crackling of the fire. Some shook rattles made from gourds, while others beat drums that seemed to echo the rhythm of Tom's racing heart. As the chanting reached its peak, pointed toward the fire. "Enter the circle now," he commanded. Tom walked slowly toward the flames, feeling the heat grow more intense with each step. By the time he reached the edge of the burning circle, his skin felt like it was being pressed against a hot stove. But he didn't stop. He stepped into the circle and sat down cross-legged on the heated ground, the fire surrounding him on all sides. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. The superheated air burned his lungs with each breath. The ground beneath him was so hot it felt like sitting on a griddle. Sweat poured off his body, and he could feel his skin beginning to redden and blister. But he gritted his teeth and remained silent. Minutes passed like hours. Tom focused on his daughters' faces, remembering every detail of their lives together before the raid. He thought about Sarah, his wife, and how she would have wanted him to be brave for their children. He thought about all the nights he'd slept under the stars, searching for Maria and never giving up hope. The fire seemed to grow hotter, or maybe his tolerance for pain was weakening. Tom could smell his own hair singeing, could feel blisters forming on his back where sparks had landed. His vision began to blur, and he wondered if he was going to pass out. But still, he remained silent. Then something strange happened. Through the wavering heat and smoke, Tom began to see images that weren't really there. He saw Sarah as she'd been on their wedding day, beautiful in her white dress, laughing as she promised to love him forever. He saw his daughters as Bobbies, tiny and perfect, sleeping in his arms. He saw the good times and the bad times, the love and the loss, all of it playing out like a movie in the dancing flames. But he also saw other things, images that confused him. He saw Maria and playing with Apache children, laughing and happy in ways they'd never been able to be in their old life. He saw grandmother White Dove singing them to sleep, teaching them skills that would help them survive in this harsh land. He saw a life for his daughters that was different from what he'd planned, but not worse, just different. The medicine man's chanting grew louder, and Tom realized that something profound was happening to him in that circle of fire. He wasn't just being tested for his courage. He was being shown the truth about what was best for his children. Suddenly, his voice cut through the chanting. "Papa, Papa, look." Tom forced himself to focus through the pain and heat, was pointing at something above his head. Following her gaze, he looked up and saw it, two eagles circling overhead, their wings spread wide as they rode the thermals created by the fire. "The eagles came," Maria shouted excitedly. Grandmother White Dove said if eagles came during a burning circle, it meant the spirits were sending a message. The Apache people began talking excitedly among themselves, their voices filled with awe and wonder, even looked surprised by this turn of events. The medicine man raised his staff and called out in Apache. The drumming stopped, and the chanting died away. In the sudden silence, the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the cry of the eagles overhead. "The test is complete," announced, his voice carrying new respect. "The spirits have spoken. Come out of the circle, White Father." Tom struggled to stand on legs that felt like rubber. His skin was burned and blistered, his hair was singed, and every breath felt like swallowing fire. But he was alive, and he was still standing. Two Apache warriors helped him walk away from the fire circle, supporting him as his body shook with exhaustion and pain. Grandmother White Dove hurried forward with water and healing salve made from desert plants. As she tended to his burns, she spoke softly in English. "The eagles are Maria's and spirit animals," she explained. "They appeared on the day the girls first came to us, and they have watched over them ever since. For them to appear during your test means the spirits recognize you as the girl's true father." Tom looked up at the circling eagles, then at his daughters who were rushing toward him. Despite the pain coursing through his body, he felt a strange sense of peace settling over his heart. "But what does this mean?" he asked. "What happens now?" The war chief studied Tom's burned and blistered face for a long moment. "Now we must decide what is best for the children," he said. "You have proven your courage and your love, but courage and love alone do not solve all problems." As the Apache people began to disperse, returning to their wickiups for the night, Tom realized that passing the test of fire was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, figuring out how to honor both his role as the girl's father and the Apache people's role as their family. The eagles called out once more before disappearing into the night, leaving Tom to wonder what message they had really brought and what it would mean for his daughter's future. The next morning, Tom woke in Grandmother White Dove's wickiup, his body wrapped in cool, damp cloths that eased the burning pain from his ordeal. The elderly Apache woman had insisted on caring for him personally, saying that anyone brave enough to sit in the fire circle for her deserved the best healing she could provide. "Your burns will heal," she told him as she applied fresh salve made from aloe and other desert plants. "But the healing we need to talk about today is deeper than skin." Tom winced as he sat up, but his mind was clear despite the pain. "What do you mean?" Grandmother White Dove settled herself across from him, her weathered hands working automatically as she ground herbs for medicine. "I have raised many children in my long life," she said quietly. "Some were born to me, some came to me through war and loss like your daughters. I have learned that love is not about holding on tight. True love is about understanding what is best for the child, even when it breaks your heart." Before Tom could respond, Maria appeared at the entrance to the wickiup. They had been up early, as was the Apache custom, helping with the morning chores. But their faces showed they had been thinking deeply about yesterday's events. "Papa," Maria said, sitting down beside him, "we need to talk to you about something important." Nodded seriously, clutching her wooden horse. "We talked all night with Grandmother White Dove. We talked about you and about Mama and about what we want to do." Tom's heart clenched. He had been dreading this conversation, knowing it might be the most difficult one of his life. "Tell me what you're thinking, sweetheart." Maria looked at, and some silent communication passed between the twins. Then Maria spoke, her 8-year-old voice carrying remarkable maturity. "We love you, Papa. We remember our old home, and we missed you so much it made our stomachs hurt sometimes. But this is our home now, too. The Apache people saved our lives and made us part of their family. Grandmother White Dove is like our new mother and is like our big brother. We know how to live here, how to find food and water, how to read the signs in the sky that tell us when storms are coming." Picked up where her sister left off. "But we also want to know about the world we came from. We want to learn English better again, and we want to know about Mama and the house with blue shutters and the rose garden. Tom felt tears stinging his eyes. What are you saying? We want to stay with the Apache people, Maria said firmly. But we also want you to stay too. Stay, Tom was confused. Here in the camp. Grandmother White Dove smiled for the first time since Tom had arrived. The girls have proposed something that is unusual, but not impossible. At that moment appeared at the entrance to the wickiup. White Father, he said, it is time for the final council. The people have made their decision. Tom followed the war chief to the center of the camp, where the entire community had gathered again. The ceremonial fire had been rebuilt, though not nearly as large as the night before. Tom noticed that the Apache people looked at him differently now, not with suspicion or hostility, but with something approaching respect. Spoke first, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. The spirits sent eagles to watch over this man during his test. This is a powerful sign that cannot be ignored. But we must also consider what is best for our community and for these children who have become part of our family. An elderly woman Tom hadn't met before stood up to speak. She was introduced as Changing Woman, one of the most respected elders in the tribe. I have lived through many conflicts between our people and the white man, she said, her voice strong despite her advanced age. I have seen too much hatred, too much fear on both sides, but sometimes, rarely, we are given an opportunity to build something better than hatred. She gestured toward Tom and his daughters. These children have two bloodlines now, white and Apache. They carry the memories of both worlds in their hearts. Perhaps this is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be treasured. The young warrior who had taught Maria to ride stood up next. I say this man has proven himself worthy of our respect. He came here not with guns and soldiers, but alone, seeking his children. He faced our test of fire and did not break. The eagles blessed him. If he wishes to take his daughters away, that is his right as their father. But if he chooses to learn our ways, to become part of our family as his daughters have done, then I say he should be welcome among us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Tom was stunned. They were offering him the chance to stay, to become part of the Apache community. Raised his hand for silence. White Father, we offer you a choice. You may take your daughters and leave, and we will not stop you. They are your blood, and the eagles have confirmed your claim to them. Or you may stay among us and learn to live as we live. Your daughters would remain here, but you would remain with them. You would learn our language, our customs, our ways of surviving in this land. In time, if you prove yourself, you would be adopted into our tribe as your daughters have been. Tom looked around at the faces surrounding him. 2 days ago, these people had been strangers, potential enemies. Now they were offering him something he had never imagined possible, a way to be close to his daughters without destroying the life they had built here. There is one condition, continued. You must choose now, and your choice must be final. If you decide to stay, you cannot change your mind later and take the children away. They will be Apache forever, and so will you. Tom felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. He looked at Maria and saw the hope and love in their eyes. He thought about his old life, his ranch, his friends in town. All of that seemed very far away now. I need to know something first, Tom said. Girls, if I stay here, if I learn to live like an Apache, will you help teach me? Will you be patient with your old papa while he figures out how to be part of this family? Both girls ran to him, throwing their arms around his neck despite his bandaged burns. Yes, Papa, said, we'll teach you everything. Tom looked up at Grandmother White Dove, at all the faces watching him. In that moment, he realized that sometimes the best way to get your children back isn't to take them away from their new life, but to become part of it. Enough, he said loudly, his voice carrying clearly across the camp. They're mine. He paused, looking down at his daughters, then back at the Apache people. But they're yours too. I choose to stay. I choose to become Apache, to learn your ways, to be part of this family that saved my children's lives. The camp erupted in cheers and celebration. Drums began to beat, and several people started singing traditional Apache songs of welcome. Grandmother White Dove wiped tears from her eyes as she embraced Tom. Welcome home, son, she said in English. Welcome to your new life. As the celebration continued around them, Tom sat with Maria and under the vast desert sky, watching the sun set over their new world together. He had traveled hundreds of miles and risked his life to find his daughters, never imagining that the search would lead him not just to them, but to a completely different way of living and loving. The wooden horse and the doll he had brought as gifts now sat beside Apache toys made from wood and clay, symbols of how two worlds could come together in love rather than conflict. And somewhere high above, eagles circled in the thermals, watching over a family that had found a way to heal the wounds of loss and build something beautiful from the pieces of their broken past. Tom Mitchell the cowboy was gone forever. In his place sat a man ready to become Tom Mitchell the Apache father, learning to live in harmony with the desert, the people, and the new life that his daughter's courage and wisdom had shown him was possible.